Where I taught on the Menominee Reservation, there were substantial economic barriers to access to education for most of the children. The county is considered the most impoverished in the state, and I think the parents had trouble connecting to the schools.
Well, we're the poorest county in Wisconsin. All of our students are free reduced lunch. I mean, it's total. We're also one of the poorest performing schools as far as standardized testing goes. But I think we have a real opportunity to move away from standardized testing. As a sovereign nation, I think we can reorganize the way we approach education and still continue to provide students a very quality education, well-rounded education, but look specifically towards Native viewpoints, Native ideas on what science was. We come from a very strong tradition of math, science, and I think that somewhere there's a disconnect, and we need to reconnect that, and that's our duty as educators, is to bring that love of science, that love of math, the observations of the world. You know, that's where we got our ideas from.
I think there's a historical factor there with the experience of Native people and education, where with the boarding schools, I mean, that's still affecting our communities today, intergenerational, the treatment of our people at boarding schools. And of course it was Canadian-wide, national. I mean, it even went to the Caribbeans. That was a disruption of culture and family and disruption of everything. So the relationship has been a non-trusting one with education. And I think the reverse of that happened when students came home from boarding schools and they could speak English, and a lot of times they would come home and they couldn't even understand their parents. Their parents couldn't speak English, and they had lost their language. A long time ago, when people came back from the boarding school and they came in back to the community, there was a change in values and status. And I read some stories where they thought that they were, you know, better than, because that's the way they were taught, that attitude when they were in boarding school. And so they would actually, you know, oppress their own people after a time.
I definitely see that non-Native teachers and administrators really influence the way the school is run, for one. It's strange to me because it feels like on the reservation in the school, if you don't have non-Native people there, it's not an official school in the eyes of some people.
My grandmother went through probably the ultimate assimilation in the boarding schools when she was shipped off to Kansas and forced to give up her culture for that time period, and it had lasting effects throughout her life. But towards the end of her life, she started opening up and teaching me a lot of the old ways, you know, but it took decades for the effect to sort of diminish enough where she could step back into the culture and start teaching again. So there was a huge gap that's missing in especially Menominee education, where the culture was basically missing 50s, 60s, 70s. And you can see that in the low economic status of the people, the feelings, you know, the loss of culture, you know, almost as if they're lost. There's a period where we were lost, and we're slowly bringing that back.
Education was used as a genocide tool, essentially, for a tribe who have almost lost their culture, and a lot of that was accomplished through the use of education. You have another layer that is terribly traumatic, that is coming into play. So it takes longer and it takes different kinds of conversations, and it involves addressing really difficult issues and giving space for conversations about racism and socioeconomic, inequities and things that I wouldn't have known that I would be facilitating.
I think it's too bad that we always have to prove how poor we are to get money. A community is never going to improve if people have developed the attitude that we have to prove our poorness to get money. Other entities in society, IBM, gets money because they do good. We should have communities, if they're doing something good, especially Indian communities, if they're really good in something and people have to go around making the case of that we're really progressing and that we're really doing something good, and not ignore the other characteristics. You still work, but it doesn't propel. And so we have to get over that. But in order to get money to make a program go, in order for people to save their jobs, they got to get those grants. And if they know they're only going to get it by being the poorest, the most impoverished, the most ill health, the most poor jobs, I mean, there are some basic facts you need to look at. But that doesn't need to be what drives the whole attitude about a community.
What I hear in the Wisconsin idea and in the statements that matter to me that the UW makes is that the UW system is here to serve all of Wisconsin's people. And all of Wisconsin's people includes our Menominee Nation and Oneida Nation and all of those students who are often marginalized in schools. So I think this is important work, and we just forge ahead.
Check it out, this is my homie Matt, Louis right here. My dog Chad right here, get him closer.
There is a political and a legal responsibility to be inclusive of the 11 tribes in the state of Wisconsin for any work that you do. In that sense, we need to have our education and academic community really dig deep into some serious resource commitment and care about developing curriculum, resources, policy, multi-jurisdictional agreements to truly understand. Otherwise, we're going to be having the same educational outcomes. Another reason I think it's of value is because almost 90% of our kids, and I've looked at data over the last 15, 20 years, go to public K-12 schools and they go to public colleges and universities. So it is critically important. Now, people might say, oh, well, the state population is only 9% Native American, but if you literally count the number of heads, we have almost 40,000 children in our public schools. 40,000 children should matter. We have the highest dropout rates, highest suicide rates, the lowest educational attainment rates. We represent, I guess, the highest in the armed forces, but in terms of professional careers in STEM in particular, we're very, very underrepresented.
A big indicator that the Native American populations in Wisconsin are at risk is that their cultures are struggling to keep their identity and have young people learn the culture. So even the Menominee have 6 people who can speak the Menominee language fluently. So they're definitely struggling to hang on to their culture, and that affects their ability to figure out how the education system works with their communities, I think, and puts them at risk. The College of Menominee Nation struggles to have Menominee and other Native American faculty members who have the credentials to teach the courses so that they're being taught from the worldview of a Native American. So yes, these communities are at great risk, and part of it is believing in the students' ability and the students themselves believing in their ability. There's been such a strong historical message that they're not capable, that just permeates the society. So education's an opportunity for us to transform that view.
They're at risk of losing everything, basically. The health of the people is not very good compared to how it was pre-contact times. Native Americans aren't living as long, as the rest of the population. They're plagued with a lot of social problems and a lot of substance problems and a lot of poverty problems that people tend to just ignore because they see it as something that's a personal choice, when really it's a lot deeper than that. There's a lot of psychological problems and barriers that go along with that. Politically, they're in danger of losing their sovereignty all the time. There's always attacks by outside governments, for example, county government, state government, that are always looking to take back some of their power or jurisdiction over the tribal lands. So there's a lot of constant battles to maintain tribal sovereignty. I see every day as a war as a Native person, to maintain that good feeling of yourself and good feeling for your people, and try to look for ways of expanding knowledge of your own traditional culture and language.
I believe that any student can learn better if we bring in ideas from their place. I think that's very valuable for the Native community because we're also bringing in aspects of their culture that can add to our instruction.
I was taught the nonlinear point of view by my grandmother and my elders when I was young. You know, consider all five senses. You know, you have a special relationship with the environment. You have no ownership over the environment. The only things you own are what was taken out of the environment or out of the living environment, and that's the only thing you possess, like a house or a chair or a car, that sort of thing. When I went to school, there was a totally different point of view, the linear point of view. Science is a good example of that linear view. I was taught that for 12 years straight. I lost the nonlinear point of view during that time. It was reinforced with how many years after school in college. Basically, I was living in that linear world, and it was probably the most loneliest time of my life. So I left school, came back, and got into school with a forestry program where I could reconnect with the environment. We're starting, as we collaborate more as tribes, we get back to a time back when we used to collaborate very closely with trade, knowledge, you know, plant knowledge, that sort of thing. Traditions, religious ceremonies were traded back and forth. I think we're going to come closer together again to that free giving back and forth that we used to have before European contact. I think it's really imperative that we do combine both in order to use the Native point of view that we have, but also the scientific tools with the linear thought process. I think it's important, it's imperative for us for our survival in the future.
A lot of the indigenous cultures throughout the world held at their core a relationship with a world that was beyond the visual and just the logical, what the mind could figure. So I think a lot of education that's science education in particular that has been foisted upon the tribes throughout the education invasion, you could call it, has them focusing on just the 2 or 3 feet in front of them, not recognizing the interconnectedness of everything that's around.
We all might have different perspectives and we might all have different questions, but what does that mean for what to write in the curriculum? What does that mean for how to support teachers and doing some of these, meeting these broader goals that we have for the students?
I think it's very important that the education community understand, or the academic community, that when you talk about social, political, community, cultural, those are all different things when you are in an Indigenous context. in a very practical, concrete way. What that means is when you go and work with Indigenous communities, the political contexts are any elected officials. The social and cultural contexts are more for the traditional people, the elders and the teachers, right? And then the community contexts are for those people who are family, community leaders, educators, and it's possible to be all of those things. When you talk about social, political, cultural, just know that when we go in as educators, we are not monolithic even within our community. Man versus woman has a different answer. Elected official versus an elder has different meaning. Age matters, clan matters.
Well, I think collaboration many times is used sporadically. When they say collaborative, sometimes it meant just getting permission from Indian tribes. Sometimes it meant they sat at the table, they participated, but the voices were not strong. They may have been strong, but it wasn't incorporated much into the research. So I think there have been attempts where it has been growing, where it is more collaborative, where and tribes now have paid attention to people coming on to the reservation and doing research.
Buy-in is a big thing when people talk about change that comes through implementing curriculum. And it's true, you need key people in the community who are ambassadors for the project so that you get a critical mass of people saying, this is a great thing, you should try it, come and see it.
Collaboration equals buy-in in my mind. Anytime you can work together with a multiple group of people from multiple cultures, from multiple situations, looking at the same issue from multiple lenses, that's when you get the buy-in that you need for something to be successful. And I think in the situation of POSOH curriculum especially, since we have been involved in so many different pieces of this puzzle, utilizing tribal elders, utilizing multiple tribes to impact the education that we're creating, I think the success rate is there for this to be a curriculum that stands the test of time.
One of the main goals is to kind of think about how to build a pathway.
More than the space that you bring people together, you need to really facilitate an experience where people are comfortable sharing and talking and don't feel like their perspective is going to be right or wrong, but that it's going to be valid no matter what. And I think that's a challenge in a lot of education systems. I think that there's certain hierarchies that sometimes get in the way of people being open and willing to share. And so it takes an effort to do that.
One of the things that led to the idea that underpins POSOH came out of a large math-science partnership that was funded by the National Science Foundation called SCALE, System-Wide Change for All Learners and Educators. Those of us who were really leading that work felt very much like the process that we went through of developing the science immersion units collaboratively was just as important as the actual units that we produced. And here what I heard that the Stockbridge-Munsee people were doing struck me as being very similar, that it was the process that they were seeing as very powerful. What we proposed in POSOH was that the work that we would do would be place-based, so that's in the name, the idea that it's place-based opportunities for sustainable outcomes and high hopes. So we felt like it was very critical that the work that we do be constrained to an area that had shared economic, environmental, and sociocultural considerations. Those are all the three considerations for when we're talking about sustainability as we're currently describing what sustainability means. And then from that would emerge from the community what's important with regard to sustainability and bioenergy. I would say that underpinning our work are two fundamental things. One is a belief, a very strong commitment to the belief that the work needs to emerge from the community itself, rather than us prescribing some predetermined notion of what is best for the community. And that the process of grappling with what's important is important for the community and all involved, that's actually the learning process and helps to set the standard for what the expectations are for science education and what's valued in that community. And then the idea that we could take that framework and share that more broadly, and that the framework would be general enough that when it would be applied in other places, how it would actually play out would be specific to their place also.
I think it's been a real stark difference when we first got together the first year with the design team. The differences in point of views were really apparent. As each different point of view was more comfortable around the other point of view, we kind of met in the middle ground, and it's made the process that much more easier, or it flows, or it's more fluid in the decisions and designs that we come up with.
The process is a big different way of doing something, but it involves all of some of the latest research techniques that teachers are familiar with, schools want to go. It allows the local community to express what is needed, and it allows the community to be who it is. And so that's what a good process will bring, and that's what POSOH brings.
This process could be used to do a whole school curriculum. If you were using this process to develop materials that could support learning in history and math and art and everything. I mean, we were trying to integrate art into science.
We're setting a specific framework for teachers and students to work off of. You know, there are certain things that we want them to understand and to know about. And I think that we would have a better understanding of integration if those ideas grew as well, if they changed and became a part of their community. They integrate into their community. In Menominee language, things are animate and they're inanimate. And there's different words for each way. And I think these things need to be animate. They need to be living, these ideas, you know, and they need to change. Yeah. I think that's how we're going to see it, is that they integrate it.
I think that for this process to be sustainable is you have to have people that come and contribute, and in this case contributing means sharing of your experiences and learning, and then learning from other people's experiences and learning. I think that's the only way this process can be sustainable, because that's the only way it can be transformative. If I just come into a room and tell someone everything that I know and then say, okay, I'm done, and leave, how is that going to be transformative for me or for anybody else?
I am a firm believer in boundary crossers and the value in boundary crossers and the value in communication. And so if we were going to set up anything formal, the thing I would like to see promoted is the development of boundary crossers and the institutionalized support for some boundary crossers who understand the culture of both or of multiple communities or entities or institutions, and out of the ability to facilitate communication and listen well, that those people, that their role is to boundary cross and help facilitate conversation.
I've been a product of tribal education all the way up to coming to Madison. I went through St. Anthony's School in Neopet for grade school. I attended the Flandreau Indian School, a BIA school in South Dakota, and pursued my secondary career at the College of Menominee Nation. So coming from that really unique perspective into the larger University of Wisconsin system has, for me, really been an enriching experience, and it's caused me to reevaluate the education that I have received and just how culture has fit into that.
I am a proud product of Green Bay Public Schools, and as a Native American person, I often felt like my voice wasn't heard and I didn't exist as a cultural being in the public schools. Even though I saw other faces like mine, we were never given a space to really come together in a meaningful way in the classroom. And I think the projects like the POSOH project bring that to the forefront and give those voices a way to be heard and also to connect with other people.
With the schools around here, the border between reservation and not reservation is very distinct. That creates a lot of misunderstandings between people, and so integrating culture into everything would be really important, because it doesn't matter what it is, whether it's STEM or math or English, people need to address those issues. Otherwise, it doesn't matter if you have the best technology, because there's going to be still social conflicts between people.
Over the last couple of years, the big thing has been testing and the standardized tests. I feel a lot of these are overdone. There's too many. Where's their base coming from? For what population of students? I think there's things on those tests that some of our children aren't familiar with. Our kids are over-tested to the point of it's too stressful for them. And I really don't think they give a clear, true picture of where kids are at. So it's not a true reflection of knowledge, especially for different other cultural populations, because those students who don't have an understanding of the dominant culture and all the intricacies about it, and they will not test as well. And they probably never did test as well or will test as well on those kinds of tests, you know, with the information that's not a part of them.
One thing about Indian corn, heirloom
We're
corn.
basing these ideas of failure at reading on standardized testing, right? That those levels are very low. And it may not be that it's the reading part and the understanding part, it's the test, you know, the test is hard. And sometimes these students, they get tested, 3-4 times a year, the same thing. I think they're just writing down, you know, answers just to do it, you know, just to get it done with.
We're trying to maintain the integrity of the curriculum, really address the mission and really address the framework in terms of what is place-based, culturally relevant science education, and how can we integrate these frameworks, these multiple frameworks and understandings about the natural world in a way that's true and not just surface level.
One way to measure the capacity is to the degree to how adaptable is it with the institutions and with all the people at the table. Are they staying in one way of thinking, or is that changing based on new information and new people that come into play?
Capacity to me means that there's some common vision and commitment to what that educational journey will look like for students, what it is that's important for them to learn, and how they're going to engage in learning it, and having that shared vision. So a straightforward, simple indicator of whether we have built some capacity would be that teachers in the area would be adopting our materials or adopting the model of an after-school sustainability club and using them in ways as they were intended, rather than modifying them to purge them of some of the innovative approaches where students are really engaging in inquiry and it's got high intellectual rigor. We don't want to see it simplified, and we don't want to see the culture cleansed out of it that's part of it, or marginalized. If we saw those things being taught, with that kind of integrity and then customized to fit the classrooms where they're being used. That would be a basic indicator that we'd had a good impact. That what we would see is that people would be creating derivative materials from what we've done, and that there would be a different focus on the kinds of expectations for rigor in learning and having students figure things out, and believing in students as that students can be motivated by the thrill of figuring things out and not simply by entertainment and fun, that for fun's sake, that some things like that, some of those fundamental beliefs, believing in the idea that Indigenous knowledge is part of what we consider science knowledge, and then some people taking on in their role as educators or leaders in the community the role of facilitating how that might play out in the community.
You know, when you think about a process like this is not easy. This is not easy to bring people together like this. This is not easy to find funding sources to bring people like this together. This is not easy to transcend university settings, tribal settings, whole regions of the state, many people. It's hard. And it's a huge circle of people that have interest, knowledge, and the desire to increase knowledge of students. So it's a pretty impressive project when you think about it. The challenge is the standards-based curriculums that are being already put in place around the Common Core, around next generation science standards. A lot of different things are happening right now. A lot of more accountability of teachers is happening, and teachers might not have the time and flexibility to do it. So that's my only thing that I see as a roadblock and a barrier to this process happening.
Family farms. The projects that have those strong collaborative networks and where there's strong participation and authentic participation, where everyone is giving and sharing resources equally, have been the most successful projects. If you look at what is published as best practices, whether in health and human services, economics, education, justice, are the ones that have those collaborative processes, long-term authentic relationship. I definitely think there needs to be a collaborative process when you're developing curriculum that's going to be put in the public schools. But I also think that there should be a Native Advisory Board or a core group of Native traditional people and Native educators that talk about what are the important things for this curriculum, or if this curriculum is collaboratively created, that is shared with, I will call it an elder or traditional advisory board, and they can give feedback. There are different levels of social justice commitment or critical frameworks that people bring. Some people don't want to rock the boat as much. Others say, hey, what about this, this, and this? So it's important you have diversity amongst not only the Native, non-Native collaborators, but when you get feedback that there's diversity, age diversity, gender diversity, level of education diversity, traditional, hardcore traditional elders versus maybe elected officials or teachers, and also philosophical diversity. If you really want to get at this, because if you have a conservative traditional Indian versus a liberal traditional Indian, you know what I'm saying, they're going to give you different types of feedback on the curriculum that's produced.
What organic molecules?
I guess the best way that we can measure the capacity for continuation is who has bought into it. Do we have the teacher base? Do we have the support from the school districts themselves to continue these processes?
I feel very strongly that in a 5-year project, getting to the ability to actually measure impact on students is pretty unreasonable. So what we're doing is we're looking at the impact on teachers. By the time 5 years is up, we will hope that we will have had an effect on how teachers envision what it is that students ought to be learning and how they practice teaching. It's changes in what they're teaching and changes in how they're engaging students in learning. And that will be our biggest measure of whether we've had an impact, is if those teachers who come and do professional development with us or were part of our design team change their practices, then we can infer from that that their students will have a changed experience too. Basically, the framework is designed for people to come together and say what's important for our students to know and understand, and for our teachers to facilitate our students experiencing. So it's, I think, very much content independent. When our collaborative design teams meet, we have teachers who aren't necessarily teaching at that particular grade level. We have culture teachers, and it isn't just about harvesting their knowledge to put into the curriculum. It's about having a broad group who's building this vision of the experience for students.
I think tribal schools need more tribal teachers or people from Native American backgrounds, more leaders from the community in the classroom, interacting with the students where they can see themselves, they can see role models, they can see their family, they can see relations that are all part of education. The kids can benefit from multiple pedagogies. The kids can benefit from multiple perspectives, and those don't always come from within the community. They could come from without, from without the community. They could come from another tribal community. So I think that the more voices we bring in, the more strong the collaboration will be and the more benefits for the kids. One thing that I think will really help is by demonstrating that all of these collaborative processes actually increase test scores, because right now that seems to be mainly what everyone is interested in at the administrative level in schools. So I think that's one way of convincing people that what we're doing is good, is positive, creates real change in the minds of the students.
What I would like to see for our students is self-worth. That knowing that our culture, our cultural ideas, our cultural knowledge has value to not just the people that are teaching them in our school district, but to other people now. POSOH project is going into other communities, and I think we need to have our students be able to see that our cultural ways are of value to other people as well. And I think that would make a change. It would give our students pride in who we are and how we became who we are and how we are going to be moving into the future.
For kids, there's so many different backgrounds, and if this local area, if we can develop different sets of curricula that can bring in all those cultures, I think it's going to be so much more engaging for the kids to learn. If we can disseminate this process to other people and show that it really does work and impact students and really engage students to improve their learning, then I would hope that this kind of catches fire and other places, other localities can take this process and do the same types of things we're doing. And
we need healing, we need education, we need to get everybody on the same page, and we need to develop that trust so we can move forward, one mind. That's the basis of it in our belief. We have to work together and cooperate.
I'm hoping that from the UW system that they can continue to facilitate this dialogue and to keep it going from now into the future.
I really hope that this process is emulated. I hope that we can take what we've learned from this process and make it happen in other ways. I hope that these units that are being created are being used in our schools in our local area, and that they're doing a good job teaching them and seeing the student engagement level increase. And this is a great process that'll do that.
For POSOH, I really hope that it connects us, communities, that our ideas and the framework that we're laying down and the curriculum that we've been creating will work and is embraced and will become a model for other ways. Like I said, math, other sciences, and language.
The POSOH project, the design concept is excellent at first step at changing the attitudes. It all comes back to the attitudes, the acceptance of a non-linear point of view of the environment. I truly believe that's why I'm so honored to be a part of this project.
I hope that this process happens with other subjects beyond just science, and that this process happens to include more people, based on whichever subject is at the heart of it. And I hope that UW-Madison continues to have a good relationship with all the tribal institutions that are at the table and all the elementary schools even, so that there can be a really quick partnership and quick lines of communications.
I think the strength and opportunity of this process in the future is that we have done a good job of documenting what we have done sufficiently that I think other communities could look at what we will collaboratively write up to explain what we've done, and then they'll be able to learn from that and customize it to be able to use in their own communities.